87 million square feet of commercial office space sat vacant in Manhattan alone as of early 2024. Dark windows on the 14th floor at 2 in the afternoon. Entire hallways where the ceiling lights stopped triggering months ago. And in the same cities with the highest office vacancy, more than 770,000 people were counted without permanent shelter on a single January night. A record. Those two numbers describe the same blocks, sometimes the same buildings, and people have been quietly filling the gap between them. This video documents how. Commercial buildings have property managers, security desks, cleaning crews, and surveillance cameras. They are not abandoned warehouses, but they operate on a set of assumptions, and assumptions are where gaps appear. 3 assumptions in particular make every method in this video possible. The first is occupancy verification. In a residential building, every tenant is known by name. Commercial buildings work differently. Units are leased to companies. Companies have employees who rotate. Subleases happen. Temporary tenants move in for 3 months and leave. In a building with 40 units where a third sit empty, the property manager may physically walk the halls once a week. The security desk watches the lobby, not the 14th floor. The second is access control. In buildings with high turnover, deactivated key cards sometimes remain functional for weeks after a tenant leaves, sometimes longer. Property management companies in cities like Denver and Chicago have acknowledged that deactivation backlogs can stretch months when vacancy rates are high and administrative staff is cut. Emergency stairwells in older buildings often have mechanical locks that have not been rekeyed in years. Loading docks and service entrances feed to monitors that nobody watches in real time. One security consultant in Los Angeles estimated that fewer than 5% of surveillance feeds in high-vacancy buildings are actively monitored. The cameras exist for liability, not prevention. The third assumption is behavioral, and it is the one that makes everything else work. A person in business casual clothing, carrying a laptop bag who walks through a lobby at 8:30 in the morning does not get stopped by security, by other tenants, or by the property manager standing 6 feet away. The brain categorizes that person as belonging before it processes anything else. One man who spent nearly 2 years rotating between 3 different vacant office units in downtown Denver described it this way. He said nobody ever asked him who he was, not once, because he never gave them a reason to ask. That behavioral assumption is the foundation. What homeless communities and cities across the country built on top of it are 4 specific methods that turn an empty office into something indistinguishable from a unit between tenants. And what makes these methods dangerous to use alone is that they depend on each other. Remove any single one and the rest start to collapse. That interaction is what separates someone who lasts a week from someone who lasts a year. The first method is called the Directory Board Identity System. It costs nothing. Most commercial buildings have a directory in the lobby listing company names and suite numbers for every occupied unit. In high vacancy buildings, that board has gaps, empty slots where tenant names used to be. Placing a generic business name into one of those empty directory slots shifts the psychological category of the entire unit. Suite 1407 with no name reads as empty. Suite 1407 with a small placard reading Cornerstone Consulting Group reads as occupied. Not thriving, not busy, but accounted for. The name has to sound boring enough that nobody looks it up. Consulting firms, IT services, regional accounting practices, the kind of company that sounds exactly like 500 others in the same city. One woman who maintained a presence in a vacant suite in Chicago for over a year used a name she found on a business card on the sidewalk. A real company based in another state. Nobody ever checked. This method alone does not create safety. What it prevents is the most common trigger for detection, which is a building employee or a neighboring tenant noticing a vacant suite and mentioning it to management. A name on the board means the unit has already been explained. Attention moves on, but a name on the board with nothing behind the glass tells a different story entirely. That contradiction is exactly what the second method exists to solve. The second method is what community networks in Portland and Seattle call the furniture stage technique. It costs between $15 and $40. A completely empty office unit reads as vacant the moment anyone glances through the door window. Bare carpet, blank walls, maybe a stray power cable on the floor. That visual signature says abandoned. A unit with a basic desk positioned near the window, a rolling office chair, and a single filing cabinet reads entirely differently. It reads as a business in its early stages, or a company winding down, or a sublease tenant who works remotely and comes in twice a week. All of these are normal. All of them explain the unit without requiring a single conversation. The materials come from thrift stores, Habitat for Humanity restores, and curbside pickups in commercial districts where offices regularly cycle furniture. A basic desk costs between $5 and $15 secondhand. A rolling chair costs about the same. A metal filing cabinet can often be found for free. Placement is where the real thinking happens. Experienced individuals position furniture near the door, side of the unit, visible through any glass panel. Personal items, sleeping materials, food, and clothing stay in the far corner behind the filing cabinet or under the desk. A passing glance through the door reveals nothing unusual. One man in San Francisco described the geometry. He said everything someone could see from the hallway needed to say office. Everything they could not see was where he actually lived. There are refinements that sharpen the effect. A wall calendar turned to the current month, a coffee mug on the desk, a jacket draped over the back of the chair. The psychology behind it is identical to what real estate professionals call home staging. The goal is not to create a convincing replica. The goal is to give the observer's brain just enough information to categorize the space and stop looking. The brain does not investigate spaces it has already categorized. Researchers studying urban encampment patterns in Portland found something surprising about this approach. People who had never communicated with each other arrived at nearly identical solutions independently. Desk near the door, personal items in the back corner, a single item of clothing visible to suggest recent presence. The convergence is not coincidence. It is the result of the same environmental pressures producing the same logical response. So the name explains the suite, and the furniture confirms the name. But neither protects against what happens after dark, and that is where the third method comes in. The third method manages something that gives people away without them realizing it. It is called the utility footprint protocol. In residential buildings, utility usage is monitored per unit. An apartment using water and electricity is occupied. One that is not is vacant. Commercial buildings handle utilities differently. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning often run on shared building systems. Overhead lighting is typically controlled by wall switches inside each suite, but powered by the building main electrical panel. Restrooms are shared across entire floors. This means that in many commercial buildings, a person occupying a vacant suite produces almost no detectable utility footprint. They are not drawing power that gets billed to an empty unit because the building common systems already provide climate control and lighting. They use restrooms shared with the entire level. From an infrastructure perspective, nothing has changed. But there is one utility signal that cannot hide. Visible light, a commercial office suite with its interior lights on at 11 at night in a building where every other unit on the floor is dark, raises exactly the kind of question that leads to a security walkthrough. The community solution mirrors what vehicle dwellers developed independently in entirely different circumstances. Blackout material over any window or glass panel that faces the hallway. In an office, this is easier than in a van because commercial window treatments are expected. A set of basic blinds costs under $10 and installs in minutes. From the hallway, the unit simply looks closed for the night. The condensation problem that van dwellers know well appears in offices too during winter months. moisture from breathing fogs, interior glass panels and door windows by morning. The solutions transfer directly. Moisture-absorbing materials placed against glass surfaces, a small crack in operable windows when the building allows it, and timing the morning routine so any visible condensation is wiped clean before the first tenants arrive on the floor. Now, here is the part that ties every method together and explains why someone using 3 of them correctly still gets caught without the 4th. The 4th method is called the access pattern protocol, and it is the reason every other method either holds for months or fails in weeks. The biggest mistake someone new to this situation makes is treating the office like a home, coming and going at odd hours, arriving late at night with grocery bags, leaving at noon in casual clothing. Each of those behaviors contradicts the visual story the other 3 methods built. An office that has a name on the directory and furniture visible through the door, but whose only occupant arrives at midnight carrying a sleeping bag cannot survive scrutiny. What experienced individuals have refined, particularly in high-rise environments in Houston and Los Angeles, is a strict behavioral schedule. Arrive between 7:30 and 9 in the morning, dress in business casual at minimum, carry a bag that reads as a work bag. Leave between 5 and 7 in the evening. On days when leaving is not possible, remain inside without visible activity after business hours. The discipline involved is significant. One man who maintained a suite in Houston for 16 months said the hardest part was not the sleeping arrangements or the lack of a kitchen. It was forcing himself to leave the building every single morning at the same time, walk 6 blocks, and then return through a different entrance in the afternoon. He said he treated it like a job because that was the only way the pattern held. There is a social dimension to this that almost never gets discussed. It is not just about when you arrive and leave. It is about how you interact with the building's ecosystem, nodding to the security guard, holding the elevator for another tenant, making brief, forgettable small talk about the weather. Each of these micro interactions builds a social footprint that reads as normal occupancy. A person who avoids eye contact, rushes past the front desk, and never speaks to anyone in the elevator eventually becomes the person who gets noticed for the wrong reason. As one woman in Los Angeles described it, the trick is being seen without being remembered, friendly enough to be normal, forgettable enough to be safe. If any of this sounds familiar, or if you know someone stretching every dollar just to keep a roof overhead, there is a free guide in the description called the Survival Blueprint. It covers practical strategies for cutting costs on housing, food, and transportation that work whether you are in a van, an apartment, or just trying to make rent this month. The link is right there. Now, the 4 methods work individually, but experienced individuals discovered something that multiplies their effectiveness. The methods interact in a specific sequence, and that sequence is what separates lasting from getting caught. Insiders call it the legitimacy cascade. The directory name makes the furniture plausible. The furniture makes the access pattern plausible. The access pattern makes the utility silence plausible. Remove any single element and the others wobble. A name on the board with an empty unit raises questions about why the office has no furniture. Furniture with no name raises questions about who put it there. A normal access pattern with no name and no furniture is just a well-dressed person walking into an empty room. This cascade is the reason the methods were presented in that specific order. Each one depends on the one before it, and the whole chain depends on the weakest link holding. The second layering insight involves the building's own cleaning and maintenance cycles. Cleaning crews typically service each floor 2 to 3 times per week. Crews working at night generally clean occupied units. They skip units that appear to be between tenants or show no signs of recent activity. A staged unit with minimal furniture and no personal items visible often get skipped entirely. One woman who spent 14 months in a commercial suite in Portland said the cleaning crew walked past her door every Tuesday and Thursday for nearly a year. She could hear the vacuum in the hallway. They never opened her door. The third insight involves scheduled intrusions, fire safety checks, HVAC filter replacements, pest control visits. These are the highest risk moments for anyone occupying a vacant unit. The community response is information gathering, knowing when inspections happen, which floors get serviced on which days, and whether advance notice is posted in the lobby. One man in Seattle described checking the building's lobby notice board every morning the way someone else might check the weather. It told him whether today was a day to be present or a day to disappear. This is what makes the whole system worth documenting, not the directory board or the desk from Goodwill. What is worth documenting is that thousands of people across American cities independently developed, shared, and refined a system that requires more sustained problem solving, more environmental awareness, and more daily discipline than the jobs they lost. One man in Denver, a former systems analyst who had been unhoused for 3 years, described it in terms his old colleagues would have understood. He said it was project management, stakeholder analysis, risk mitigation, environmental scanning, the same vocabulary, the same cognitive framework applied to a completely different problem. The difference was that failure did not mean a bad quarterly review. It meant sleeping outside in December. This knowledge was not written in a manual. It was passed between people in shelters, in food bank lines, in the parking lots of public libraries. It was refined through failure and shared out of necessity. And it exists in the gap between two numbers: 87 million square feet of empty space, 770,000 people without shelter, same cities, same blocks, sometimes the same buildings. The knowledge is the bridge between them, built not by policy, but by the people the policy forgot. If this kind of hidden survival knowledge is something you think more people should understand, subscribing means more people find it. A like pushes it further than you would expect, and the video on screen right now covers a completely different survival system that these same communities built with the same quiet ingenuity. Click it if you want this. Reaching the people currently living through these conditions and not just reading about them.